don't know who needs to hear this, but public sector workers have the same basic rights as private sector workers in the UK. Actually, I do know who needs to hear this, and it's all the people who work for the public sector in my comments saying, does this actually apply to me? They're asking about really basic stuff like unfair dismissal, discrimination, even like super basic stuff like unpaid wages. Yes, this stuff applies to you as well. But there are some exceptions for certain types of work. For example, if you're in the police, if you work in hospitals, parts of the Working Time Act will be different as it applies to you, but you still have rights when it comes to even those things. It just means that they are different. A good example of this is compensatory rest. So most workers in the UK who work over 6 hours have the right to one 20-minute uninterrupted rest break during that 6-hour shift. I get a lot of care workers, a lot of workers in hospitals and places like that saying, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I don't get any rest breaks. You do, you get compensatory rest breaks, which aren't as good because it means that they can make you work through that shift, but they still have to give you a rest break back to make up for the rest break that you missed. Unfortunately, they can also ask you to take it like at the beginning of your shift or at the end of your shift, but you still have a right to compensatory rest. And yes, there are a few jobs where there's a complete exception to compensatory rest. For example, if you're in the armed forces or something like that. But on the main, most people working in the public sector as well as the private sector has the same rights. So let me just list off the rights that you do have in the public sector, which is most of them. Under 2 years of employment, you have the same day one rights as everyone else. You have the right to not be treated differently because you're a part-time worker. You have the right to not be discriminated against. And remember, there are 6 types of discrimination. So often that happens without you really realizing what it is. You have the right to organize a trade union. You have the right to blow the whistle. Like, there are so many rights that you have even under 2 years. And then over 2 years, you have the same rights to not be unfairly dismissed, the right to compensation for redundancy, and the right to not be constructively dismissed. You can see this playing out in the headlines right now. There are bullying, harassment claims going on in lots of MPs' offices at the moment, and that's because civil servants have the right to not be harassed at work, not to be constructively dismissed. They have those legal rights. It just seems like, for some reason, we all live in this collective fantasy that these rules don't have to apply to people who work in certain places. But it's not true. You have those rights. So if you are a public sector employee and you think that something bad has happened, you think that you want to understand what your options are, the first place that I would recommend you always go and look is ACAS. And then I would recommend that you check out some of the links on my own profile. We have a free action toolkit, which basically kind of talks you through from the point where something bad happened, what your options might be. And then there are tons of resources here on this video page and also on our website that can kind of help you understand what your next steps might be. But you do have rights, you can exercise them, you have just as many rights in many ways as private sector employees.